Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dispatches from the Field. This is our last one of 2025. It went by in a blur. If you are joining us for the first time today, this is a new, I guess not as new as it used to be, initiative from the Explorers Club, really designed to better connect our global community, highlight the incredible work of our members, and give a way for us to be able to really make sure that we're maintaining connections aside from doing the in-person events. So here's how it's going to work. We are going to have a featured speaker. After the featured speaker, of which, by the way, you're welcome to put in some questions in the chat. After the featured speaker today, then we will split up into what we call campfire sessions, which are breakout groups. This gives you the opportunity to be able to connect with other members, introduce yourself, allow room for everyone to introduce themselves, make some new connections, and we'll make sure that our featured speaker rotates around in the room so everyone gets a chance to ask and learn a little bit more about the project. So, good to go? Here we go. Let's dive in. We are closing out the year on a high note with the remarkable featured speaker, Trevor Wallace. He's an explorer, filmmaker, educator, and of course, member of the Explorers Club Board of Directors, where he previously served as Vice President of Research and Education and was honored as the club's 2018 New Explorer of the Year. No small thing. Trevor leads the multi-year Menorca Shipwreck Project in Ciutadella, weaving together underwater archaeology, naval architecture, and community engagement. Through the project's field school and his PADI specialty course, Exploration Diver Underwater Archaeology, Trevor mentors the next generation of explorers while documenting early 13th century and later wrecks. Of course, he partners with Spanish institutions and the Ocean Foundation to expand scholarships, public outreach, making sure that his work doesn't just stay beneath the surface, but really reaches up and inspires the communities around the world. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Trevor Wallace.
Well, thanks so much. That was a wonderful introduction, Brandy. And yeah, I'm very excited to share about our expedition this year. It's the third year of the Menorca Shipwreck Project, and I already see a couple of our team members in the participants. I see Jeff and Mark. And yeah, so I will do a little bit of a recap on our past campaigns. Um, just to get everyone sort of situated both geographically and in terms of the excavation that we've already done. And then I'll be jumping into what we found this campaign. So I'm just going to open. Okay. Okay, so I'm not seeing my presentation as one of the options to open. Um, okay. Felix, yeah, when I do the share, okay, now I can see it. None to fear. Okay. All right. So yeah, I like to open up with this little slide. This was the excavation trench that we had in 2023, a very small piece of the puzzle in this little cove in Ciutadella, Menorca. This actually was one very, very small part of many other things that were to come. And it's always a funny thing to look back on this little trench that we started with. But a bit about me. I've been part of about 12 different flag expeditions around the world, mostly in southern Siberia and India and Panama. I'm an expedition leader and a documentary filmmaker, and was lucky enough to realize this dream of leading an underwater archaeology expedition. Does this expedition take place? So a lot of people know Mallorca, Ibiza, a lot of these Balearic islands that are known as vacation destinations, but Menorca, the easternmost of the Balearic Islands, is a beautiful place and a place that's honestly just jam-packed full of history. It was a crossroads for maritime trade across the Mediterranean. If you can imagine people coming from west, this was the first stop-off point. And you have these incredible natural ports. On the eastern side, you have Maon, which is one of the longest deep water ports in the world. And on the western side, you have Ciutadella. Ciutadella, which you can see indicated on the left side, is an excellent port for ancient navigators because you could see Mallorca from there. And circled on the right is our little cove of Cala and Busquets. And these were important stop-offs for trade and also military strategic positioning. So it was the ancient Roman settlement of Iamo, but going back even before that in Iron Age and Bronze Age, there were people there building huge monumental stone structures. There's really just so much in Menorca, all of these stone structures being UNESCO World Heritage Sites dedicated in 2023. But we found this little cove that ended up being essentially a graveyard for ships. This is the modern day port of Ciutadella. As you can see, it's still used today, mostly by small craft. And you can see the traditional yacht, the lateen sailboats, which come in and out of the harbor. So back in 2009, they had proposed to expand the inter-island ferry between Menorca and Mallorca. And what you're looking at here is an archaeological diagram of all of the test trenches that were made in Cala and Busquets, this little cove at the sort of at the end of the harbor where they thought maybe they could expand. Essentially, all of the blue dots were positive test trenches. So when you think about a test trench, it's just a meter by meter, just to see, okay, is there any archaeological material here? Can we build any big infrastructure? Not only did they find late Roman, possibly medieval, something that looked 18th century, there was just shipwreck upon shipwreck and tons of scattered cultural material, ceramics, artifacts, even just on the surface. So the decision was made not to expand, luckily, the commercial ferry port there, but outside. So this is what a drone photo over the cove looks like. In 2007, that little jetty was built, and there was a road built over the back end of the cove. But otherwise, it's been pretty undisturbed, which is extremely rare. If you know about anything about harbors, most of them are dredged, either dredged in the early 20th century or dredged later for boat traffic. For larger vessels to go through, you need a bigger clearance. And just luckily for our project and luckily for the history of the island of Menorca, there's been relatively little disturbance here. Yeah, there's some moorings, and obviously some of these floating docks have been put in, but in terms of disturbance to the seafloor, relatively little. So this is, you can see another drone photo. This is when we're actively excavating. You can see our floating dock. We operate off of this little platform. And then the jetty provides us a really excellent place to spread our wetsuits and all of our gear. We load our tanks down, and you can see we have some like Honda water pumps and those blue hoses. And if you can make out, there's a diver bringing our diver down flag to our excavation area, and it's pretty much right in the mouth of the cove where we decided to start excavating, and you can see the trench that we're opening. So a lot of people ask, why would there be so many shipwrecks in a safe harbor, in essentially in a port area? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. There's that ships sink. They could be from warfare or conflict. Obviously, winter storms in the Mediterranean are frequent. But there is also a very specific type of meteorological event called a risaga or a meteor tsunami. which because of the angle of the cove and because of the angle of the port, essentially you have these very intense tide changes over a very short amount of time. So it's essentially a, like the name says, a meteorological tsunami, which for as far as it's been documented, really specifically first mentioned in writing in the 15th century, there are these big events that sink a lot of ships that are at safe anchor. So when I heard about this underwater museum in a little cove in the beautiful place of Menorca, I wanted to establish an expedition there. And I thought, because it's in 4 meters of water, this is an amazing opportunity to train folks to bring them into this black box that is underwater archaeology. And because underwater archaeology is usually very expensive and you need ship time and the costs start to add up, the huge benefit of this project is that we don't need a ship and we don't necessarily need people who are tech divers or super advanced. Of course, learning the methods of underwater archaeology is a whole other thing. And that's why we decided to establish the field school that we've run now for 3 years going. We've trained over 40 folks, more than half of them being Explorers Club members. You can see here Mark Langevin, who designed our PADI specialty course. He's a master PADI instructor. Barb Duran, Sarah Hellstern, Jeff Fallon, Colin Dietz, and then our team members. In the back there, we have our scholarships student, which I'll talk more about. And I should definitely mention the scientific co-directors, Xavi Aguelo, who actually first did those test trenches back in 2009. Dr. Marcel Pujol, who's a naval architecture specialist and professor. He wrote the book on medieval shipwrecks, so we're very lucky to have him. His PhD student, Aymar Malwenda, and our tech lead, Bruno Perez. So we wanted to design a PADI specialty course so that we could bring in Explorers Club members who maybe have some experience in diving or are curious about underwater archaeology. And Mark did a fantastic job working months to design this course so that people can dive on this site safely. Even though it's only in 4 meters of water, roughly 15 feet, give or take where you are on the site, there is still a danger of boat strikes because it is an active harbor, and also operating equipment underwater is a challenge. Operating equipment in low visibility is a challenge, and having the situational body awareness enabled to do this. So in our field school, which lasts about 2 weeks. This is the first step in getting that certificate from the museum, and able to actively excavate, and be part of the team is doing this PADI specialty course. The Sunken History Scholar Program, through our grants, through the Ocean Foundation, the Stevenson Foundation, Dan and Quincy Imhoff, we have been able to support the next generation of explorers and underwater archaeologists. We had Aidan Babao in 2023. We had Fox Langer in 2024 and Domonko Sabo in 2025. And we're very excited. We actually just got wind that we're going to be able to expand our scholarship program next year. And it's really exciting because there actually aren't that many underwater archaeological sites that are easy to access, especially for newer divers. So back into the site. First thing that many archaeologists and these types of fieldwork teams do is they look into the archives. And we wanted to read up about any of the ships that had sank in Cala and Busquets in this little cove. And we found that there was a ship documented sinking in 1702. Caveat to that is that we also found in our archival research with Octavi Pons in the Museum of Menorca that many of the documents were destroyed in the 16th century by Ottoman invasions. So we knew there was a lot that wasn't going to be there, but we knew at least, okay, we know there's this 18th century wreck. We opened up a trench in 2023. We found evidence of a shipwreck. Then a bunch of storms came and completely covered that trench. So we had to start all over again. And we started a new trench a little bit further to the mouth of the cove, and we started to find some ceramics. But there was something kind of strange about these ceramics. None of them were from the 18th century. We opened up this trench, we had our theories, and at the end of 2023, we covered it back up. That is how we can conserve the site. As you can see here, we have about a meter of dead Posidonia, seagrass roots, and sediment before you get to the wood of the ship. And a lot of folks do imagine that when you go down there, it's like Pirates of the Caribbean and you have like a fully intact wooden ship that you're going into. That's not exactly what we're working with. With hundreds and in some cases thousands of years, we're working with the very bottom 5% of the ship. So the naval architecture that makes up just the bottom, but we can learn a lot from that, and the artifacts can also tell us a little bit more. Although in a harbor context, it's always difficult because people chuck stuff in harbors over the course of thousands of years. So it can be confusing. In 2024, we opened that trench back up, and you can see we were able to make a lot better headway. We didn't have the same storms that we had in 2023. And here you can see Texas chapter member Andre going full Rambo with the dive knife. This is actually the most efficient way to get through those dead Posidonia roots. We do train in the specialty course in the field school how to do this in a safe way, especially in low visibility. You don't want to stab your dive buddy. It's always important. You can also see Dr. Gino Caspari being a absolute lunatic diving with no wetsuit. We do like to dive with wetsuits and usually 5 mil to be comfortable. But there you can see him in the back. Yeah, taking advantage of the very nice Mediterranean waters. Like I said, we kept finding ceramics that looked medieval. They didn't look 18th century. It was an interesting clue of what was to come. Once we were able to clean, and here you can see the underwater vacuums that we use. It's basically a flexible hose that use the Venturi system to take the top of the sediment and push it out through that long discharge tube. And we float them with buoys, and so that we can float over the fragile wood of the wreck and do a naval architecture study. Here you can see Dr. Pujol doing the study. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of all of the different naval architecture of ships at this time. So this is a very important part of our research. You can see we actually use the ear tags that are used for cattle for marking the planks, the frames, and the hull wood of the ship. And you can see the wire, those little squigglies are marking all of the nail holes in the planks. The ceramics continued to confuse us. Some really interesting, unique pieces that we honestly are still part of our ongoing research trying to find comparisons for. This piece, for example, some of our team members have found similar ceramic vessels in the Levant in Syria. Others think that there might be a local production in Mallorca. This is a luxury ceramic item that is another clue to what we are working on. And here you can see a 3D model made by our tech lead. This is sort of an ortho photo looking down on our excavation trench in 2024, made by our tech lead, Bruno Perez. And yeah, those who have joined us in Menorca know this photo because we found that we were not excavating one ship, but two ships stacked on top of each other. So you can see the red outlines what could be the bow of one ship and then going over what possibly could be the futtocks or the side of another ship. And here's another view. You can really see, it's difficult to understand the difference between the size of the frames, but you could really tell these were two different ships. And in fact, you have the hull planks that are on top of other frames. So unless the ship broke and turned back in on itself, that would be a very strange thing to happen. And then we started another excavation trench and found what looked like another ship. And in this, you can see how those different trenches were oriented. The new excavation area with the orange bar you can see at the end. We just thought, okay, we're gonna just do one little test trench and see what's over here. Of course, we find what looks like another ship. And then we took some wood samples and we C14 dated the ships. And sure enough, not one, but all three of them dated to the 13th century. And that was a shock for us. We thought, okay, we found all these medieval vessels. Maybe this was, one ship that sank in the medieval period, and then maybe the Purísima Concepción is on top of it, that 18th century wreck that we read about in the archives. Sure enough, Purísima Concepción, nowhere to be found. And these all seem to be coming from the 13th century. Below you have the calibrated dates for Cala and Busquets 1, which was the first ship that we started excavating, and then Cala and Busquets 2 and 3, all pretty much falling in this very important century in Menorca's history. For several hundred years, Menorca was part of Medina Menorquia, so it was an Islamic caliphate. And it was a very interesting time. Lots of poets, scientists were coming to Menorca, and as the Reconquista pushed down on El Andalus, many of these dignitaries, these important elite folks, were coming to Menorca. There was a coup d'etat in the middle of the 13th century. There was all this going on. Finally, in 1287, when Alfonso III conquered the island, it was taken over by the Aragonese crown. So obviously there was a ton going on. And what an amazing opportunity to find this kind of wreck, which is incredibly rare in the Mediterranean. Here we have 2025. We decided to excavate going north to continue along Cala and Busquets 1. And you can see those big round stones are millstones that we found on top of the wreck. Could have been cargo, could have been ballast. We're now doing geological samples to see where these millstones came from. What we have preliminarily is that one of them looks like it was from a quarry in Mallorca, but we have to confirm that. This is the really interesting stuff. These are all clues to this big puzzle. Um, we also found more ceramics. We found a really interesting ceramic vessel, which was very commonly used in water mills. And the Medina Menorquia, this independent taifa towards the end of the 13th century, it was a very, very well run, strategically planned center. Ciutadella was the center of the Sultanate on the island, and they had very sophisticated irrigation systems. They had very sophisticated waterworks, and you can see this sort of oblong jar was used in a watermill. This is a recreation in the Museum of Menorca, and they have almost identical vessels in the museum collections on the island. So we could say, oh, wow, okay, now we're starting to connect these things. We can't make assumptions, but it's starting to paint a clearer picture of the time period and the culture behind these ships. And as we progressed, you can see Dr. Pujol doing the naval architecture study this year. You can see we're bagging up all the ceramic bits in between the frames. We extracted the wood so we could do a detailed drawing. We did more wood sampling. We're doing wood species analysis so that we can see what types of trees these came from, and maybe geographically place the construction of the ship. Of course, the C14 dates does not tell us when the ship was built. It shows us when the tree was cut down. So it's still a little bit of a moving target. And also, just because Medina Menorquia was in power in Menorca at that time doesn't mean the ships were coming from there. A little Easter egg for later. But oftentimes there's a mix of cargo. And again, the harbor context is really complicated because you have all this different material mixing around. So here, as a little recap, you can see the different excavation areas. You can see our two millstones. You can see the two shipwrecks that we found, Colin Busquets 1 and Colin Busquets 2 in 2024. And then you can see our big excavation trench. And just to give you an idea of size, this is about 6 by 6 meters was our excavation area in 2025, and about equal to that in 2024. And we actually went beyond this as well, because you can see Colin Busquets 3 up where the orange bar is. We wanted to see the relationship between these two ships to figure out if it's a different ship or not. So we opened up another excavation trench and we found a lot of really interesting things on Cala and Busquets 3. You can see faintly on the image in the right, there's two sort of, they look like stones, almost shell shaped. And it was one of our field school participants, team members, Ed Dixon, who was uncovering this. And he thought, okay, this looks like a big piece of slate. How strange is this? It's just a big piece of slate. Maybe it's ballast. Maybe it was weighting the ship down. And we tried to move it a little bit to see, okay, if this is a piece of slate, you could maybe just shift it a little bit. It would not move at all. And sure enough, as we uncovered it more, it turned out to be a large kind of slab of lead. This was a lead ingot. Um, what it was doing there is really interesting, because one of the ongoing theories about why these ships may have wrecked across the mouth of this cove is maybe they were intentionally scuttled to block the harbor. Maybe during one of these attacks over the centuries, maybe they were intentionally sunk. But in our opinion, as we're continuing to form our hypothesis around it, you would never intentionally sink something, a ship, with something as valuable as lead on it. In those times, lead was incredibly valuable. It was probably a cargo item that, when the ship was sailing, was used to ballast the ship because it was incredibly heavy, but something very, very valuable. Um, this looks like it might be the bow of Cala and Busquets 3. We'll be doing more C14 dates just to try to make sure that we didn't make any errors, that Cala Busquets 1 and 3 are indeed different ships, and we'll continue our wood species analysis. One funny little one-off is that we do have a lot of wildlife on the site. We participate in a harbor cleanup with the Nautical Club, and we try to pick up all the contemporary trash and make it. It is an amazing place to dive, and we found year after year little friends in the among the finds that we made. And you can really see the span of use of this harbor, because these are actually Roman amphora. The photo by Dave Hodge on the left, another club member, is in an area where there's clearly been another Roman wreck in the cove. We named that octopus Dave after Dave, of course. And then this year we had another little amphora with a different octopus. This one was much smaller. We named her Cleo. And yeah, it is an amazing experience to be able to excavate this site. We're making our plans to return in 2026. We're in the process of writing a paper. Of course, there are way more questions than there are answers about these wrecks. We're trying to address maybe how the ship sank, and then, of course, get closer into the identification of where these ships came from. And then further on, there'll be more papers about the individual finds that we made. But it's such an honor for me to be able to lead this incredible team. I've learned so much from them. All the field school participants and team members have been fantastic. And Menorca is just such a rich place of culture and history. Um, I want to especially thank all of the supporters and partners, Servicub that brings us all of our tanks, the Museo de Menorca and Museo Cansaura, where we have our expert talks and public presentations, and they make it open so we can look and study their collections. The Ocean Foundation, our fiscal sponsor, the Philip Stevenson Foundation, which helps us with our Sunken Scholar Grant program, along with Dan Imhoff and Quincy Tompkins, the Club Nautic, which helps us with our platform and all kinds of things, and our dive shop partner, Blue Water Minorca. And yeah, so our field school applications are currently open. The website is menorcashipwreckproject.com.
Absolutely amazing, Trevor. Thank you so, so much. Boy, this is the stuff that dreams are made of. So thank you for sharing this. If anyone has a quick question, we'll try to get to it, but pop it into the chat. I'll kick it off with just one, which is of this 7-layer cake that you're finding in this harbor. I can only imagine the excitement you must feel when you're like, oh my God, did we find another one? What are some of those physical clues that may indicate that you found another shipwreck? Orientation, alignment?
Yeah, so as I've learned over the past years, and specifically from our naval architecture expert, Dr. Marcel Pujol, you start to understand like the floor plan of a ship and the different components that make up a ship. So you have your basic hull, and then you have frames, which are like the ribs of a ship, and then deck planks. And as you're excavating, a lot of it, because these are wrecks, is mixed together, and we have a lot of areas. So a lot of the cleaning process with the vacuums is trying to make this somehow legible. So as we're excavating towards the end of the expedition, it does start to get a little bit more clear. And what we were finding is that whenever you find hull planks that are on top of other deck planks, then there's something weird going on. And if you can kind of tell, okay, this is the way the frames are going, you can more or less understand the direction of the ship. And as we expand more, we'll understand better the orientation of these ships. Of course, within our team, there are competing theories about how many wrecks there are. There's definitely at least two. Um, uh, and yeah, I mean, I'm seeing in the chat how many more years could we be excavating in Gala and Busquets? I mean, we know there's a Roman wreck on the other side of the cove. We know there's another wreck of late Roman material in the center of the cove that there's a lot to do, and we already are doing quite a long field campaign. For example, Xavi has excavated a lot of underwater archaeological sites, and our campaign of a month to 6 weeks is one of the longer ones that he's done. Um, so we're really doing as much as we can. That said, we only can excavate during the fall because in the summer there's too much boat traffic. The danger of boat strikes is too high. And in the winter, running a field school in semi-dry suits is a little bit tricky, and it's just not as comfortable to dive. So really, it's the fall. It's sort of late September, October, a little bit of November, and then you start getting into dicey storm frequency that makes it tricky.
The storm that made all those shipwrecks happen. So we've got to work with Mother Nature on this one. All right, guys, we're going to split up into the campfire sessions now. It's going to be a tight one this time, but we will do our best to make sure that Trevor rotates around into the different groups. So if we didn't get to your question, hang tight. Hopefully you'll have the chance to be able to ask in person. Trevor, thank you so much. We'll see you all in a moment.